Hello everyone, and welcome back to my Magic the Gathering Commander deck list reviews. This is a series where I go through either my own personal commander decks or those submitted by users and break them down to the more core mechanics. I'll talk about the commander, what the deck is generally trying to do, give my feedback, and wrap it all up with my thoughts at the end. If you want to get your own deck list reviewed, make sure to head up to the top link in the description to get your deck personally reviewed by me. With all that being said, let's get to the review here. So today's episode, we are talking about Cloud X Soldier, going back to some Final Fantasy stuff, just because there's so many really cool commanders in here. This one specifically is the Cloud from the Commander Precon. Kind of an interesting one. Of course, a big theme, I think, of Final Fantasy, or at least one of the archetypes really was, Voltron equipment sort of stuff. We got Job Select as a new living weapon variant, which kind of have a focus on in this deck, but specifically with Cloud here, we've got a Naya commander, so 2, a red, a green, and a white for a 4/4 with haste. He's a human soldier mercenary, so maybe some typing there. When he enters, you attach up to 1 target equipment to him, and whenever he attacks, you draw a card for each attacking creature you control. And then if Cloud has 7 or more power or greater, you create 2 treasure tokens. So a lot of stuff going there. There's a lot of things you can do with this commander. I think one of the more powerful and the more important things with him is the fact that he has haste, so we can kind of just get rid of all of the, Swiftfoot Boots, Lightning Greaves sort of stuff. And he auto-equips himself, so this is a good one. With most equipment Voltron commanders, a lot of them are, 4 CMC, 3 CMC, 2 CMC, whatever. They're fairly low mana cost for the most part, at least the more powerful ones. And so you're playing them and then getting equipment down. But weirdly, this kind of works the other way, where you want to get a good amount of equipment down, or at least 1 or 2, because he has haste, so he can immediately come in and attack, and he auto-equips himself. So getting down, like a Colossus Hammer or something crazy down a little bit earlier allows you to immediately swing in and get stuff with this, and specifically with Cloud, if you can get down some creatures as well to be able to get more card draw off of his attack, and pump his power, of course, to get more treasure tokens. There's a lot of different things you can do with this, and so specifically, of course, there's kind of this weird pushback just with Voltron in general of the awkwardness between Voltron wanting to be on 1 creature, just because, of course, you load up the 1 creature, your commander, you deal the commander damage, and you have a bunch of stuff on 1 creature to do. So there's certain Voltron styles that, care about 1 creature attacking, Exalted type stuff. But there's a lot of commanders like Cloud that care about having multiple creatures attack, which can be fairly difficult just because the Voltron deck is kind of that, it's oxymoronic in that way, where it wants to just be the 1 creature attacking, just generally with how it works, but having multiple creatures out to all have them equipped and whatever can be a lot harder to get, only so much value. So that's where one big part of this deck comes in. Something I've been wanting to do for quite a long time is sort of use our living weapon. So living weapon, there's a lot of variations. I think we've got living weapon, 4 mirrored, and job select, and there might be 1 or 2 more, but these are the main ones here, where basically it's an equipment that comes down and creates a token that it automatically equips to. So you don't have to worry about trying to get a creature down with whatever its mana cost is, also get an equipment down, and then equip it to be able to use with Cloud. These automatically come down, you just cast them, they already have something equipped, and then next turn or whatever, they're good to attack. So bit of a living weapon thing here. Nothing too crazy. This is a bracket 3 deck. We got our 3 game changers. It's a fairly expensive one just because, well, with Voltron, there are a lot of really good artifacts we can run. So we're running about $475, which I wouldn't consider budget in any way. Definitely expensive. We don't have like the most expensive stuff. Like I didn't, throw in a Mox Opal or anything crazy like that. But we do have some fairly expensive bombs in here, not, of course, including some of the game changers, but just a lot of really good equipment as well. So for living weapons, though, we've got Batterbone. So this one, the living weapon, it specifically creates a 0/0 germ that auto equips, so this gives equipped creature +1/+1 vigilance and lifelink. It's not too bad, and these also can be nice later if the germ gets killed in some sort of way or whatever token. You still have the equipment around to be able to re-equip to your commander, or if you just want to re-equip to your commander anyway, like Battlebone's not a bad one to get down, have around, and then play Cloud immediately attack, because you get a 5/5 with vigilance and lifelink, so not too bad with that. Though just generally, if you want to get more card draw out of it, which is a very powerful ability, having multiple of these down is nice to have. Bitterthorn we got from our Commander Precon, pretty good. It's a good old ramp spell. It also gives a little bit of a buff just to keep the germ around. Batterskull, one of the more well-known ones. It gives a creature +4/+4 vigilance and lifelink, and you can bounce it to its owner's hand. So there's some stuff there. No combos or nothing like that in this deck. There are ways you can definitely do that. that. And there are also interesting things I don't think a lot of people think about with equipment specifically, and just the way that, you know, equipment aren't artifacts that tap. There's some synergies like that you can kind of use to your advantage as well. But within here, you know, just a few interesting things. I do like this creates tutus for Mirrodin does. And I do like a lot of the ones that came out of the precon for Phyrexia. They got some cool stuff there. This one gives equip abilities you activate of other equipment, cost 1 less, so that's just a nice thing. Now, there's a lot of those as well. Of course, you can see the mana cost for a lot of these are, you know, 5, 3, 7. We've got a fairly high curve, which is why we're running quite a lot of ramp or just cheat spells. A lot of things that allow us to kind of cheat the cost of either the equip or just the straight mana cost of the card. But that one's kind of nice, gives creature double strike, so, you know, that's a good one to just have around for our commander as well. Very easy one. You know, it's got a lower mana cost but a higher equip cost, you know, which is nice. You know, like it's a Colossus Hammer type of effect where getting that free equipped is even better. Though just by itself having that free equip is, or the reduced equip cost of Blade Hold is kind of nice as well. We also have some job select stuff. So Dancer's Chakrams creates a 1/1 colorless hero token that gets attached. Gives equipped creature +2/+2 lifelink, and other commanders you control get +2/+2 and have lifelink. So this is kind of a nice one that you don't have to re-equip, that, you know, gives sort of an effect to Cloud as well. And it makes the thing a performer. Doesn't really matter on that part of it, but getting both effects for just the creature that you have and then also giving your commander that effect is nice. Hexplate Wall Breaker, this gives creature +2/+2, and whenever it attacks, so first combat you get an additional combat. You untap all your Titan creatures, so that's another thing. You can definitely go more with this. I'm not super heavy on the extra combat side of things. We do have some stuff that get extra combats just because, you know, that's a very powerful effect. You know, getting multiple Cloud triggers off his attack triggers kind of nice as well. I don't have, you know, a Windcrag Siege type effects where you know, you're doubling attack triggers, just because might as well get extra combats. I think that's the easiest one to do because you're also getting all the damage and stuff, though that is something you can move towards if you want to go more towards trying to trigger him a whole bunch and go towards the sort of singular Voltron like most decks in the archetype are, where it's just, hey, here's Cloud, yes, he'll draw me a card, whatever, I just care about equipping him up. But for this one, we're going a little bit wider, so we have a little bit of a varied game plan compared to that. Probably the best living weapon here, Cauldron Complete, does a whole lot of stuff. It's, you know, indestructible. It gives equip creature +5/+5, first strike, trample, indestructible, haste, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a creature, exile that creature. So like super death touch. Kind of a nuts card. Of course, the 7 equip and 7 mana costs are pretty expensive, but again, there are a lot of ways to cheat around that. Machinist's Arsenal. It's another job select. Equip creature gets +2/+2 for each artifact you control and is an artificer in addition to its other type, so kind of just an all the glitters effect. You know, it's fairly expensive for what it is, though. This gets really big. It's actually better than a lot of the all the glitters effects because it's +2/+2 for artifacts, so you're getting twice as much value. So just by itself, this is just a gigantic creature, but again, not a horrible one to also equip the Cloud. And then straight up all the glitters effect with Nettle Cyst. Equip creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment you control. We don't have a lot of R's in here, of course, because we're specifically an equipment deck, less Enchantress side of things. We have a few here and there just for extra value, but mostly sticking to the equipment just so you can get more triggers off of Cloud. I mean, that's mostly the living weapon side of stuff. It's not a huge part of the archetype because there's only so many we even have access to anyway, but just a little something to kind of spice it up and kind of change the, you know, throw a wrench into the normal archetype that we play within. As for board wipes, we've got Blasphemous Act and Austere Command, just destroy type board wipes. I'm not especially a fan of running like Austere Command, or not Austere Command, Farewell, like Exile type of effects, because if you can run something that destroys or deals damage, you know, there's a good amount of equipment to give indestructible, or you can just have a creature that's big enough to deal with that, so it's not too bad. And of course, the variability of Austere Command is also nice, and then just Blasphemous Act being, you know, very cheap equipment or cheap board wipe to play most of the time is nice in that. Card advantage, not a whole lot of card advantage in here either, especially because, you know, we're getting a good amount of card advantage off of our commander, at least hopefully. So a few in here, but not a lot. I mean, we are also in Naya, so we don't have the greatest card advantage anyway, but we do have, for our card advantage, some pretty good picks here. So of course, Buster Sword, we're playing Cloud, we kind of got to have his Buster Sword. Gives +3/+2, and then whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, it's also nice because, you know, this synergizes very well because it does put him up to 7 power to get the treasure tokens. When you deal combat damage with the equipped creature, you draw a card. so there's the card advantage, and you may cast a spell from your hand with mana value less than or equal to the damage without paying its mana cost. So, you know, if you're hitting with just this in Cloud, you're hitting for 7, you can cast something 7 or less from your hand for free, which is kind of nuts. You know, it's a very, very good card, and also, you know, has a lot of other extra synergy. First game changer in here is Jessica's Will. You know, just of the game changers that we can run, I think it's the best one, providing both a whole bunch of mana off of, you know, being one of the better rituals, and also getting us some impulse draw on the backside of that as well. Kind of a weird one here, Maria, Scholar of Antiquity. So this is one of those that I think is really good and should be running if you're running a Gruul-based artifact deck or equipment deck especially. I think you should be running Maria every time, just because a big thing with artifacts is they do not care whether they're tapped or untapped. They're just an artifact that sits there, has an equip cost. So you can use other effects, you know, like an Urza type thing where you're able to tap artifacts for blue or tap them for whatever abilities. You can just use those without actually, you know, turning off your equipment in any sort of way, just because they don't really care about that. So Maria, you can tap an untapped non-token artifact you control to add green, which of course is pretty much all of our equipment. So it just gives all our equipment the ability to tap for green, which is really nice, makes them all mana rocks. And you can tap 2 untapped non-token artifacts you control to exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn, so it gives you also an impulse draw effect with that as well. So another really good one. I think it's one of the better cards in the deck just because of how much it synergizes with everything else. And you know, it is a 3-mana 3/3, so if you go and end up attacking with it, that's also not too bad. Pure Steel Paladin, again, just another staple. Whenever equipment you control enters, you draw a card, and you know, it's got a cheat ability as well. Reckless Impulse and Ren's Resolve is just, you know, some impulse draw, pay 2 to exile the top 2, play those this turn, or up to your next turn. That's what I really like with these as well, is you can play those cards for 2 turns. So if you hit 2 lands, you can still play both of them. Which is nice with that. You know, you're not risking as much with these impulse draw effects. SRAM, whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle, you draw a card. You know, pretty self-explanatory there. It's sort of Forge and Frontier, gives +2/+2 and protection from red and green. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn, so some impulse draw, and you may play an additional land this turn, so, you know, some ramp on top of that. So some pretty good ones. You know, it's nice to have, you know, the repeatable draws with our permanents here, you know, like Maria, Pure Steel, and SRAM, just being able to keep drawing cards off of stuff and make those cards, you know, a lot more powerful, and you know, they're worth a lot more as a card advantage engine. So cheaters, that's a huge thing with Voltron in general, but especially for our deck because we have such high mana costs. So having stuff that either cheats equip costs or cheats just mana costs, both are really, really important. So Arden, you know, pretty well known. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may attach any number of Arden's equipment you control to target permanent or player. So you can just kind of equip everything to Cloud all by itself. Or, you know, and that's another thing with it is it only attaches to one thing, but you can move any number of things. So if you've got like 5 living weapons that you have sitting around, you play Cloud, you can attach one. Combat, you can attach all the other ones and, you know, swing all out. This may not be as powerful an effect as it could be in this deck just because we are trying to have multiple things with equip costs, though, you know, you can equip 1 or 2 things from here or there to any creature you want. And I do also like the ability to swap around auras if you do try to play more of those. That's kind of a nice extra there. Brunor is really good in here. Gives equipped creatures control +2/+0 for each equipment attached to it. So that's really nice. So it's just every single equipment that you're using just becomes a lot better, gets that additional effect of just giving the creature +2/+0, which is really nice. And you can pay 0 rather than pay the equip cost of the first equip ability you activate each turn, so it also cheats that equip cost too. So both of those are really good. I think this is another one of the better cards in the deck just because it offers so much extra value on top of everything else. And Codsworth, Handy Helper is really nice. Gives commanders we control Ward 2. You can, and it's also a mana dork that adds 2 white to spend to only cast our equipment spells. So, you know, it's basically just a regular mana dork most of the time anyway, even with that restriction. And it's also got the cheat ability of attach target R equipment you control to target creature you control, activate only as a sorcery. So another way to just, you know, I like the versatility of this one, not only protecting our commander, but also giving this ability to add mana or just to get the free equip. It's kind of everything we want with our ability here. Forge Anew is really nice. When it enters, you return target equipment from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, you know, just kind of a nice sort of cheaty thing. It's just reanimation. That can be good, though. You know, if you have some, you know, have to mill stuff, or, you know, I think you can definitely go for more of a reanimation plan. You know, there's a lot of like pre-war formal wear, and there's a good amount of, you know, I guess replenish. No one's really going to be playing that one. But there's a good amount of ways to reanimate equipment and, you know, artifacts and gems in general. In Boros, especially just white cheat. So you could go more that route to get some cheat stuff, but really here, it's nice you can activate equip abilities anytime you could activate as an instant on your turn. So you can kind of do that all you want, especially if you got a free equip. You know, you can really make combat very difficult by just being like, hey, I'm going to swing with all this stuff. Whatever you decide to block, I can just move all the equipment to something else to, you know, kind of put all the power in one direction to, you know, make it really evasive, which is kind of cool. And the bigger thing here is you may pay 0 rather than pay the equip cost of the first equipment. So it's just the Brunor text again, though this, you know, has a whole lot of abilities on top of everything else. So a really nice one I like running in pretty much all of the Voltron decks just because there's no reason not to. It provides a whole lot of value. And Halvar, kind of weird. I was surprised to see how expensive it's got. It's a really, really good card, I think. It gives creatures you control that are enchanted or equipped double strike, which is really the main part of the card, but it also says at the beginning of each combat, you may attach target art or equipment attached to each creature you control to another creature. So it doesn't give you a free equip necessarily because it already has to be equipped to something, though, of course, we have living weapons that, you know, are going to enter equip, so there's a little bit better value through that. That's kind of a nice effect, though. Honestly, with this card, the cheating is nice, but the double strike is way more valuable. Inventory management, this is kind of just literally all it does is cheat equip costs. So it's got split second, so it can't be interacted with as long as it's on the stack. Players cannot cast spells or activate abilities. Only triggered abilities can go on the stack. And for each art equipment you control, you may attach it to target creature you control. So you can kind of just get a one-time art effect pretty much. So that's kind of nice, just in case. And, you know, having that ability to the split second can be good if you've got like a dark steel plate or something. Or like, okay, I need to protect my commander now, or a shroud, you know, something like Swiftfoot Boots. If you're running that, I would be like, okay, I need to protect this and not give them a window to interact again. This is a good way to do that. Man of the Ancient. So this one I put in here because it is a cheater. This is another one that's very good for the reanimation type effects. When it enters, you return any number of target aura and or equipment cards that could be attached to enchanted creature from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to enchanted creature. So that's just a good way to do that. And then it also gives, you know, the effect of +1/+1 for each art and equipment attached to it. So, you know, sort of, and all the glitter's not as good because it's, you know, only caring about what's on it. But I like this one to have as sort of just a way to rebuild. You know, if someone Vandal Blasts or something overloaded, or you just, you know, get wiped in some sort of way, and, you know, it's not exile based, this is a good way to just rebuild that board instantly, which I like to have. And just sort of an escape button if you really need it. The Hammer of Nazan is sort of one of the better known cheat spells in here. When it enters or another equipment enters, you may attach that equipment to target creature you control. So, you know, just get that auto equip. And then gives creature +2/+0 and indestructible. So all those effects are really nice, especially in indestructible. A lot of people forget that Hammer Nazan does that because it already does, you know, just the effect of auto equipping would be great. Giving that extra ability as well. Just all around a really good card. Pierce Talon, we talked about the ability to draw, but if you have Metalcraft, you control at least 3 artifacts. You can all equipment you control equip 0. So this is one of the better ones just because it's not a once per turn, it's not a tap ability, it's just, hey, all of your equipment can equip for 0. So that's really cool. Sigarda's Aid, also one of the better known cheats. It's a 1-man enchantment, says aura and equipment spells you control have flash, and whenever an equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach it to target creature you control. So not only is it giving us instant speed ability to cast any of our equipment, it's also auto equipping them. So this is, you know, really well known modern as, you know, a hammer time staple for that deck. Being able to just like, hey, I'm going to equip you with this, you know, very inconspicuous creature. Okay, you're not blocking. I'm going to flash, you know, a hammer and just immediately equip and hit you for like 12, 20, whatever. You know, kill you if that ends up being the way it is. But you're able to kind of just hold up information and kind of ambush them better, which is nice for, you know, a very attack-centric deck. Lastly, here we got Stoneforge Mystic. Also very well known. You can pay 2, tap it to put an equipment card from your hand on the battlefield. So this one is very different from the rest because it's one of the few that actually does equip the casting cost rather than just the equip cost. And its instant speed ability. So you can be like, okay, it's really good for our living weapon effects because, of course, those are immediate blockers. So, you know, Cauldron Complete is one of the better ways to use this, where you just pay 2, tap it, immediately get a Cauldron Complete down. That thing has haste, so even if it's your turn when you use it, you can immediately attack and, you know, wreck phase with however you end up doing that. But, you know, again, there's a lot of good ways to cheat out our stuff and get the ability to not have to pay a bunch of mana for already expensive artifacts. Equipment, we don't just have 7 equipment. We've already seen some already, but these are just generic equipment that don't really fall into a different category. They're just very good for the deck, but, you know, that's all they are. They're just really good equipment. So Behemoth Sledge, so just ways to pump our commander is kind of good, but of course Trample and Lifelink for this one, +2/+2, get a little bit of extra there. Colossus Hammer, of course, that's kind of the name of the game, is getting this guy out, especially if you've got Cloud, because you pay the 1, it gets out, and then you pay for Cloud. You immediately get the equip, and then you're attacking for a whole bunch of damage. You hit his triggers, and then you're kind of striking face with that. Ember Cleave, really good for this deck. It's not always a card that I would run, honestly, in most equipment decks, because it more cares about having a bunch of creatures attacking, which of course Voltron is not very well known to do most of the time. But for this deck, it's actually good because we are trying to attack with a lot of creatures, so you actually get best of both worlds with that. So it costs 1 less for each attacking creature you control. And whenever it enters, you automatically attach it to target creature you control. So that's kind of the ambush thing with this. It gives the equipped creature +1/+1, double strike, and trample. So dealing 10 damage with Cloud, kind of out of nowhere, is really nice. And getting in that damage with the trample, all around, just a very nice card. People that have played Standard when this was legal, kind of the boogeyman there, has seen a lot of play, and definitely one of the better ones for our archetype. Excalibur, Sword of Eden. It's a 12-mana equipment, which seems kind of nuts, but it does cost X less to cast, or X is the total mana value of historic permanents you control, which, of course, Cloud is already 5 of that if you have him down. Historic is sagas, artifacts, or legendaries, and we just have a high CMC usually for a lot of our stuff anyway, so this is going to be, under 5 mana, maybe even 0 mana a good amount of the time, and it gives equipped creature +10/+0 and has vigilance, and it gives has only equipped legendary creature too, so you can't equip it to normally just a regular creature like a Stoneforge Mystic, unless you give it some sort of other equipability. Though most of the time, again, you're just gonna get this down, equip it to Cloud, and then you're gonna hit for 15 or 14 or whatever, get a whole bunch of extra damage on top of that. Genji Glove, one of our newer ones and one of our better ones. This one's kind of nuts. It's a 5-mana equipment, has equipped creature, has double strike, and whenever equipped creature attacks, if it's in the first combat phase, untap that creature. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So this one is nuts because it's a colorless way to get extra combats, which just isn't really available in any other way. And the double strike is also nuts because that means you're with just a base Cloud. If someone can't block, you're dealing 16 damage, not only with the 2 combats, but with the double strike. Which if you pump him by like 2 power, if you can get him to a 6/6, that's just killing someone. So kind of a nuts card by itself, just because it does put people in lethal range pretty quick. Lockstone Warhammer gives equipped creature +3/+0 trample and lifelink, so this one's just kind of nice because it hits that 7 power threshold, and then the trample and lifelink, of course, just generically good as well. And speaking of generically good, we got Masterwork of Ingenuity, so you can run like Sculpting Steel. I don't think I have it in here because this one's just straight better in a lot of ways for our deck. You have it enter as the battlefield as a copy of any equipment on the battlefield, so get yourself like an extra Colossus Hammer, an extra Genji Glove, whatever. There's so many different ways, or even just a living weapon, getting yourself not only that equipment, but also an extra creature on the board. Just, again, a nice one. I like having these modal cards that allow us to kind of change things according to the situation. That's also another good thing to have. For interaction here, we've got a Chroma's Will, which I'm surprised isn't a game changer because I feel like it does change the game when you play it. It is one of the will cards, so if you cast it, if you control your commander, you can choose both modes, or if you can't, you just choose one of the 2. Both modes are extremely good, though. You can either have creatures you control gain flying, vigilance, and double strike till end of turn, or creatures you control gain lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors till end of turn. So if you give them all of that, that by itself, just giving that to your commander, not only is it basically unblockable because it gets pro all colors and it gains flying, but also the double strike, the lifelink, and this is everything. And that's another thing with this card is it's great in go wide decks because you're getting so much more damage out of it, which that's kind of what our ability here is. There are some non-bow type stuff that you kind of gotta look out for, like Ember Cleave. That's not super good with this, or our Behemoth Sledge, just because they are colored, and so giving our commander protection from all colors is not super great because these immediately fall off. Though that being said, you can just pick the mode of giving vigilance, double strike, and flying if you already have some equipped, so you don't have to do it. This isn't just that dead card. Otherwise, just that top effect honestly is usually enough to also just win the game. But if not, you still have the ability to play it all and just get a whole bunch of extra value off of it. Most of our stuff in the deck is colorless. We got a few that sort of break that barrier, but honestly, I think once you're casting this, most of the time you're just gonna end up winning the game. And besides that, we got good interaction pieces. Beast Within, Chaos Warp, Dispatch is a cool one to have for artifact decks, because if you got Metalcraft, it's just a Swords to Plowshares without any upside for our opponent. We got regular Swords to Plowshares, Boros Charm. I like that it not only can give our permanents indestructible till end of turn, which is the main reason to have it, but it can also give our commander double strike, or any creature double strike, as sort of a last ditch effort to be like, hey, okay, I'm just gonna try to do that little bit of extra damage to end up killing killing an opponent kind of out of nowhere at that instant speed, rather than being on an equipment that they can see, okay, I have to full block, or else I'm going to take lethal damage if they don't, or that they can't. You can kind of catch them off guard with that as well. And the Dawn's Truce and Heroic Intervention kind of just being the same spell, though this can give you hexproof, which is kind of nice. If you gift a card, you can also give the Indestructible, so a little bit more modal with that, but a lot of times can be more powerful. And then one of our other game changers, Nefarious Protection, again, just kind of another one you might as well run in, if you're running, if you can. It's just probably the best protection spell. Just being able to know about the game for a turn is pretty powerful most of the time, especially if you're down to like 2 or 3 opponents, or 2 or 1 opponents, rather than, the full amount, or especially with the 1v1, if they're swinging out at you, the crackback that you can do with this is just kind of insane. And for lands, we're only running 36 lands. We do have a lot of, high mana cost stuff. So it might seem a little low, but we do have a lot of ramp pieces in the deck, a lot of ways to cheat stuff in. We've already went through the sort of cheat category. So it's not the biggest deal, and of course we want to be able to make sure that we're drawing artifacts and equipment. I had this at 38, but honestly 36 is also not too bad, and nothing crazy in the mana base. I did add both of the newly printed Edge of Eternity's Shocklands, but that's mostly because I normally don't add Shocklands in here, just to try to keep the budget a little bit down, just because it's kind of superfluous, just because the mana base, you can kind of sky's the limit with this, and it can just add a whole bunch of erroneous value to this that you don't really need. Though honestly, what I've said with a lot of these is most of these pretty good untapped duels. We've got all the filter lands, the pain lands, the tangle lands, we've got our reveal lands, all of them, check lands, slow lands, all of it, and almost none of them are all that expensive. Our Shocklands, and they're under $10. I think this is the one time I like running the Shocklands, because with how newly they've been printed, they're finally under the $10 budget that I usually try to go for with lands. So that kind of, I think, is not too bad. I think these are easy times, and it's also sort of a public announcement to be like, hey, pick these up as singles right now if you can, because like with the fetches, like with pretty much any of the staples, Nefarious Protection, all those, like when a double masters or a master set in general comes out, it's nice to pick all these up, because they will immediately skyrocket in value, because after that print run is done, they're so popular and they're so wanted and vied for, that they're really going to shoot up in price. So that's definitely another thing to do, be like, hey, grab these right now while you can, because they are going to go up to $20-$30 if they don't get printed again. Within a year or two, they're going to be fairly expensive. So that's there. Some interesting ones like Kessig Wolf Run to give a creature trample till on a turn, a Spire of Industry just because we have artifacts, a Buried Ruin to get an artifact from our graveyard. Besides that, nothing too crazy, just kind of generically good and cheap mana base for our Naya commander. And then kind of already talked about our living weapons, just a few in here. There are more to run, but they aren't super great. It's kind of like vehicles, where a lot of them just aren't very good, or they're kind of clunky. So kind of just try to pick the best ones that we could run and the ones that kind of matter the most. And ramp, we have a whole bunch of ramp, just because, we're an artifact deck, so we're running a lot of our mana rocks. We've got all 3 of our talismans. We've got Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, sort of a normal stuff. We talked about a few of these, like Bitter Thorn, and Maria. Sort of the Animist, just equipment that allows to ramp as well. When the creature attacks, you tutor for a basic land to the battlefield tapped. Sort of Forge and Frontier gives us an extra land drop for the turn, just as well, as a ritual. The Reaver Cleaver, whenever you deal combat damage to a creature or a player or planeswalker, you create that many treasure tokens, and it also gives the creature +1/+1 and trample, so you're able to get through a lot easier. Just sort of another one that, 1 or 2 hits from this, and, Cloud is already creating treasure tokens, so even if you're able to just have this equipped to Cloud, get the 5 treasure tokens off of that, that's a huge upside. Sid gives our equipment and vehicle spells cost 1 less to cast, and then you can also pay 2, tap it to return equipment or vehicle from your graveyard to your hand. Codsworth we already talked about as a mana dork for our equipment. We got Farseek, 3 visits. Inspiring Statuary is one of our other, I think it's the only other one that cares about tapping our equipment, though again, those effects are really powerful for this deck. We're not in blue, so we don't have as many good ways to tap artifacts, and we're not really like a Clock of Omen type of deck where we care so much about tapping artifacts, as opposed to just having the ability to have them make mana. Inspiring Statuary gives non-artifact spells you control improvise. You can tap artifacts to help pay for the colorless and generic mana cost of those spells. So that's kind of nice for, we have a lot of creatures just generically in the deck to play. And so we can't, use that to improvise our artifact spells. That would be kind of a little too busted. But you're like, okay, I'm going to get out, pay the 2 generic for Jessica's Will, or one of our ramp spells, or, a lot of our other creature spells, any of these spells, we have a lot of different ways that we can use that mana as just, a way that, these aren't doing anything else on the battlefield other than being equipped, so you might as well tap them when you can. Also got Sword of Feast and Famine. When it attacks, or when a equipped creature deals combat damage, they have a defending player discard a card, and you untap all lands you control, so that's really nice. And, you know, of course, the +2/+2 and protection from black and green is really nice. You know, the protection can be fairly good. Though, again, you gotta be kind of careful with these. They give pro green, so if you have a green equipment, or in this case, also red equipment attached, it will fall off. Though, again, most of the time, we're not going to be having that, or you'd rather have, you know, Sword of Feast and Famine than a lot of other equipment just because it's that good. But yeah, just nothing too crazy in here. I mean, Sword of Feast and Famine, I think, is one of our bigger bomb equipment just because it's extremely good. You know, that ability to tap all of our lands. There are a lot of ways. If you run like an aggravated assault or some way to get repeated combats, you could totally do that if you want to go infinite with this deck, though. Just generically, it's also just a great equipment. And then we don't got a value category. We do have a few tutors in the deck, and we got our last game changer in here. There are a lot of good tutors for equipment, specifically in Boros, so you might as well run them if you can. So a line tutor, of course, just a tutor for an artifact or enchantment card and put on the top of your library. Nice to have at that 1 mana spot. Kellen, I like this one because it's both a tutor and another creature we can have on the battlefield. So it has an adventure to search your library for an equipment card, reveal it, put it into your hand. So it's just an open the armory, exact same thing there. And then it has double strike, and other creatures you control get +1/+0 for each art equipment attached to it. So if you do play it as a creature, it still has value on that side rather than just being just for the adventure side. Steel Shaper's Gift, search your library for equipment card, reveal it, put it into your hands, or just kind of a better open the armory, because we are, you know, these do allow you to search for auras, though we, of course, are really just an equipment deck most of the time anyway, so this is just a better enlightened tutor a lot. Stoneforge Mystic, you know, when it enters, we get a tutor for any equipment card put into our hand. And of course, the reason why this is great is because it can also just immediately put that equipment on into the battlefield as well. So kind of that double whammy there. And then Sunforger. So Sunforger is nice because not only does it pump our commander to get to that 7 power point, but also you can pay a Boros, unattach it, and search your library for a red or white instant card with mana value 4 or less, and cast that spell without paying its mana cost. So you could, if you wanted to, be like, hey, I'm going to unequip this. I'm going to. It doesn't work with Enlightened Tutor because the Sunforger effect makes you shuffle your library. So you would Enlightened Tutor, put a card to your top. Once that spell is done resolving, it'll just shuffle your library again. So it doesn't work for that, but, you know, we have a good amount of instants in here. Though honestly, just by itself, I love Sunforger as a way because it's a red or white instant spell with CMC 4 or less. That is great for just straight up grabbing a Chrome as well. Having access to this at any time that you want, you know, a game-ending piece, I think is just worth it by itself. Though again, you know, we're able to grab, you know, our Boros Charm, Dawn's Truce, you know, any of these spells. And we have a good amount of stuff that we can grab through it that I think it's worth it on top of just being an equipment that pumps our commander to get to that point. But yeah, that is our Cloud X Soldier deck. We've got a lot of cool stuff in here. I do like a lot of the synergy. I like being able to do something slightly different because I do a lot of equipment decks, and I've actually done, you know, quite a few Voltron decks. And having just, you know, that slight change, I've tried to kind of go in that direction with a lot of these, is give you sort of a vision as to having a little spin on a normal archetype that a lot of people play. And I know the hard thing with a lot of Voltron decks, it's sort of the infect problem where you're like, oh, hey, I'm going to play Voltron. I'm going to target one opponent. They're going to die. The other 2 people are going to kill me. I like with this, and one of the better upsides of trying to get through that awkwardness of having multiple equipped creatures is you have a bigger board that just, you know, getting Edict over and over again, that usually destroys most commander decks that are Voltron based, or just a Maze of It. You know, any spot removal can usually just end up, you know, ruining a Voltron deck's day. But because we are, you know, running more creatures, we can kind of pad out that ability a little bit more and have a little more protection for, you know, our commander, whatever else. But yeah, I hope all of you have enjoyed this video. If you want to check out the Mox Field, I will leave a link to the deck list in the description below. If you want to check out any of the other deck list reviews I've done, I will leave a link to the playlist on YouTube as well in the description below. With all that being said, I will see all of you beautiful people in the next one.